A good friendship is a great space within which to simulate competition. And competition is at the core of our connection to both society and our relationships with other people, both in the sense that competition not being present is an expression of relationship, and so is it when it is present. But the reason that I say that competition is the core of relationship is because that's a critical failure point for a lot of relationships, is how you deal with competition, competing desires, competing viewpoints, competing thoughts and feelings. If you don't have a good relationship to failure on a personal level, it complicates things tremendously, because then all of a sudden boundaries are being placed, or you're being wounded by stuff that people are saying, and you're reacting out of woundedness, which feeds into these patterns and cycles of poor communication, of miscommunication, poor communication, discontentment. If you cannot be wounded by the stuff that people are saying to begin with, then you are much steadier on those oceans of society and life and relationship in the world and all of that. And the key to being steady in that way is having a really good relationship fundamentally to competition. Because competition is the place that your wound comes from. And let me explain how that works. Competition is where your idea of failure comes from, personal failure. And your idea of personal failure is where your woundedness comes from. And that is why it is so important to have a really good relationship to competition and to the concept of failure. And that's why a really good friendship, especially when you're young, can be a great place to explore failure and woundedness in a safe way, by simulating all of the elements of society in a competitive friendship with somebody who lovingly says things that other people could say to belittle you, demean you, bully you, treat you like garbage, essentially, make you feel bad, make you feel worthless. And now what I'm talking about, some men especially are going to recognize, some women too, but it's a typical younger male relationship, especially around high school. And it's actually very important for the development of a healthy psychology, because if you can maintain that sense of fun in competing with somebody who actually cares about you, and you know that they are not trying to hurt you by the things that they are saying, if they are making fun of you, what they are doing is they are giving you a very quick tour of all the things that people in the world might say to you, or might think about you, might feel about you. And they're helping you come to the place of responding to all of that with the only answer that's any good. I don't care. You have to not care. If you go through your life caring, you go through your life carrying a wound, a trigger point, something people can dig into. And when people dig into that wound, it complicates your life tremendously, because you stop being rational, whether or not you know it, and whether or not it's to a very great degree, it still happens. So this is why looking at yourself and saying, I would like to encounter all of my own failure is so important, all of my own notions of failure. Because that's how you dig into every part of your system of esteem, of self-esteem. It's not just about building yourself up. It's about understanding why you even have the capacity to be torn down, because it shouldn't exist in a healthy psychology. because you should be so strong that, and it's almost paradoxical. It sounds silly when you say it out loud. You should be so strong that other people's words can't hurt you. Like, how insane is that? Why are people so attached to their own woundedness that they're going around going, I'm getting hurt by everything, and this is who I am, and it's who I want to be, and I don't want to be bigger or better than this. I don't want to be somebody who's not getting hurt. Well, fundamentally, people do that because of woundedness and fear of repeating wounds, and they want to find people who aren't going to hurt them and aren't going to try to hurt them. And so there's a dialogue that's created that is about avoiding these kinds of competitive, sort of interpersonal dynamics, where competition is even seen as a bad thing, where people will tell you, if you have a friend that talks to you this way, who calls you names and puts you down and challenges your worth, essentially, they'll go, that's a bad friend. That's somebody who doesn't care about you. But that's not true. It can be a bad friend, but it doesn't have to be. Because what it can be is a friend who's just competing with you. You compete intellectually, you compete in video games, you maybe compete for a girlfriend or a guy or something like that. You compete to be the most charismatic or the most charming. You compete to be the most successful. Because fundamentally, what you both understand if you're in this space and you're doing it the right way is that none of it matters. It doesn't matter if you're successful at a job. It doesn't matter if you get the girl or you don't, or the guy or you don't, right? It doesn't matter if people think you're really cool or funny or whatever. These are all just perceptions of things that are fundamentally stuff that most people in society use to reinforce some sense of self-worth because they have an abyss in their own esteem, where they are not able to provide themselves with an indestructible sense of self-worth that comes from having accepted failure completely, so that they no longer see anything as failure, because in fact, failure does not exist. It's not a real thing. That's just a story you tell yourself. And because our emotions are completely a product of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the world, and thusly our place in the world, you can tell yourself a different story, and I can prove it. So let's say you set out to create a business, and the business is not successful. Some people would go, I am a failure. My business did not succeed. But that is not a literal fact. What is a literal fact is that the business failed. The business did not succeed. That venture did not succeed. But all that happened to you really was that the circumstance of your life changed. And then you equated a negative quality with that change. You said, this quality of my venture failing is a negative thing. It's a failure because it put me in this circumstance where I don't have a succeeding business. But that doesn't mean that you were a failure, because that's a completely ephemeral idea. It's a completely ethereal idea. It's just an imaginary thought. Think of it like a dream. You just go from scenario to scenario to scenario to scenario. Is there a way to fail as you are moving through a dream? Not really. And so let's go back to this and I'll try to make it more concrete. So your business fails, right? It doesn't work out. That puts you in a different scenario. That's all. You're just sitting there with a different set of circumstances. And now these are all opportunities to succeed. You go, I have this debt that I have to take care of. I have my house, I have my life, I have some form of work I'm doing. And those are all just different things that you're doing. If you were succeeding with the business, you'd be sitting there going, here I am succeeding in this business. And a lot of people find that to be something that feels good to them. But it only feels good to them because they can't challenge it with the idea that they're still a failure. Some people in that situation would. They would go, well, I'm succeeding in a business, but I'm not a billionaire, and so I'm still a failure, right? And so it's about how you define things. But if you're in that business, you're working, you're doing the business, you're succeeding, Okay, so what? Because if you're not in the business, you have this debt, you're sitting there, maybe you're sitting around and suddenly you start to look at things creatively. And you go, you know what? Maybe I don't really want to be doing any of this. Maybe what I'd really rather do is something else entirely. And so you take care of your business, you take care of your debt, and then once you're done doing that, if that's the approach you take, people will take all sorts of different approaches, right? But let's say this is the road you go down, and then you go, because I'm not going to put my energy into this business, I've decided to try writing a book, and I'm writing a book about failing as a businessman. I'm writing a book about how I experienced that and how I approached that part of my life. And then you have this book now. Now, let's say on the one hand, maybe you sell the book and it does great. Then were you a failure for failing at the business? Or were you just a success for writing the book that you couldn't have written if you didn't fail at the business? All that happened is your circumstances changed. Or you end up with the book and it doesn't do anything, but you have this book and now you've written a book and there's another thing that's happened in your life. And so this comes down to another aspect of all this that's really important, is what people are avoiding in the concept of success and failure by placing such a primacy on that, is they are avoiding the inherent meaninglessness of life. They don't want to look at how none of this fucking matters. It doesn't matter if the business is successful. It doesn't matter if the book is successful. It doesn't matter if you're living in a house or you're sleeping on the sidewalk. None of it matters. It's relevant in the sense of, okay, if you're sleeping on the sidewalk, it's maybe very cold, you're fighting for your life, you're fighting hunger, you're fighting, infections, diseases, and these things. That also doesn't mean that you are a failure or have failed. None of that has to filter into your concept of yourself as a person. It doesn't have to filter into your esteem, because that's what this is all about. It's all about self-esteem. And when you have self-esteem, it's a lot easier to create situations in your life where you are succeeding and you're not in unfavorable, undesirable circumstances. But part of every circumstance that you're in is just who you are. You're in every circumstance. So making that a picture of success is the only thing you constantly have control over, because you decide what success is. And you decide what failure is. You're the only person who can truly decide that you are a failure and have that matter to you. If somebody else decides that, and it matters to you, it's only going to matter to you if you also decide that you are a failure. If you have decided that you are not a failure and somebody says that you are a failure, you're not going to care. Because you'll go, that's just your opinion, man. That's just something you thought up in your mind, and you're placing that on the world, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just words, it's just talk, it's just an idea. You're just yapping. And so that's the thing that a really good friendship can simulate, is if you have a friend who can get under your skin, thank them. Thank that friend, because they're a great friend for doing that. That is a hilarious and awesome thing to do for your friends from a place of love, to get under their skin, because it's what they need. That's what psychological healing and wholeness is. And this is something that a lot of therapeutic modalities miss, because what they do is that they try to create compatibility out of the idea of people essentially capitulating on a certain level, which is that they remove a primacy and a value from the idea that we shouldn't be able to offend each other. People act like that's not an important truth. They go, what really matters is your feelings. Feelings are automatically valid. But feelings are not automatically valid, because feelings can be fucking anything. Somebody can rationalize or justify anything through their feelings. feelings are almost automatically invalid, I would say, unless they are feelings of love and romance and joy and harmony. Those are valid feelings. But then what people do is that when they have negative feelings, they kind of fall back into those negative feelings. They create barriers and boundaries, and they draw all these lines in the sand. And now anybody who comes near them has to respect those lines. Anybody who comes near them has to not offend their sensibilities, their esteem, their sense of self, their sense of worth, these things. You've created eggshells for everybody else to walk on that have nothing to do with them. And it may not be your fault. Like, it's fine to have boundaries. You go, oh, I need a safe space to explore because other people have hurt me. That is perfectly sensible, but at some point, you have to come to the realization that you need to have a healthy relationship to competition and to the idea of being seen as a failure, because that's what gives you an enduring psychology that will last and is indestructible, is not able to be wounded or hurt by the world. Because you are coming at that world from a place of not being able to receive a wound from literal ideas, from literal thoughts that people have, which is such an absurd thing to receive a wound from, because you know that it's not the ideas that themselves that are hurting you. If you spoke a different language and somebody said something to you, it wouldn't mean anything. Maybe if they said it very angrily, you'd be like, oh, they're angry with me, and then you'd feel something. But just the words themselves, if they enter into you and wound you, you must be the one that's wounding yourself with them. You must be the one that's filtering those words that way. And now part of this that's complex is that somebody you have esteem for and care about saying something to you can hurt your feelings. And that is a reflection of the difficulty of communication and the way that we all think differently, we all speak differently. As Noam Chomsky said, he was a famed neurolinguist and historian. He said it's essentially a miracle that anybody can understand each other at all, because our internal worlds are so different. The way we think and feel is so different. And that is very reflective of relationships and coming to really understand people's points of view and their thoughts and their feelings. But if you can support yourself in the world and just not care what people think, you're doing so much better than a lot of people are. But the problem is, the more that you don't care what people think, then the more truthful you are, the more honest you probably are. And I don't mean like, telling people about their insecurities on purpose, but what I mean is that you're just honest about how you see things. And if you're removing all of your woundedness, or don't have that woundedness to begin with, then you might find that you see other people behaving irrationally. And if you point that out to them, that's going to be something they find wounding, because everybody wants to be seen as rational. They want to be seen as a success and not as a failure. And so if you point out to them their irrationality, they will take that as a rejection of some part of their worthiness as a person who is deciding how to see the world in a correct way. And so what can happen is that people fall into their emotions, they dig into their emotions, and they end up in an emotional competition because they're so busy trying to create space for everybody to exist in, which is an absurd concept, really. And the reason for that is that it's much, much healthier to just permit open discussion, to just be like, hey, everybody express your thoughts and feelings. Whatever is true to you, talk about it, be rational about it, and don't validate the idea of invalidating other people's thoughts and feelings. People can say that I don't think that your thoughts and feelings are valid, in the sense of saying, I think that you're being irrational and reactive and kind of crazy, right? But what I'm getting at is that what you do is you go, hey, it's okay. It's okay for you to be you. It's okay for you to be a crazy person, basically. But, I want you to know you're a crazy person right now in this moment. And here's what you can do to change it. Here's the thing you were saying or doing that is so crazy to me, that's so obviously crazy, which often involves a person placing a primacy on the value of their own thoughts and their own feelings to such a degree that it invalidates the thoughts and feelings of other people. Because here's something that I can tell you for sure, is that when you arrive on the ultimate conclusion of any thoughts and feelings, you don't need to invalidate anybody else's thoughts or feelings by being there. You just have your own perspective on every mechanism, on every idea. And if they hear your perspective as invalidating their thoughts and their feelings and their ideas, that's where they are just wrong. But they're buying into that, they're believing in that because it serves their ego in a certain way, because they're trying to hold on to their sense of their own rightness and their idea of their own rightness. And people do this in the service of a lot of altruistic sounding things, in the service of a lot of like friendly oriented, community oriented things, like getting along with each other and stuff. But they're still really glorifying their own sense of their own rightness by invalidating anything that disagrees with it, by saying that there is a right and a wrong way to think and a right and a wrong way to feel about social issues, for example. Where it's not, hey, there's a right and a wrong way to think or feel about social issues. There's just a right and a wrong way to do things as a society. And that's where you have to take the collective wisdom of everybody together, and hopefully it adds up to something that's smart instead of something that's like Donald Trump, right? So unfortunately, democracy favors stupidity just as much as it favors intelligence. But, you hope that the greater body of people favors intelligence. And in any case, I'm getting away from the main idea here, which is that just because somebody is propping themselves up as some crusader for morality doesn't mean that what they're doing is not manipulative and like psychotic, basically, right? Like a lot of the issues in society right now have to deal with, it's okay to say this thing or that thing, or it's not okay to say this thing or that thing, which is just an absurd place to be, because it's dealing with imaginary things that aren't real, figments of the mind. It's not dealing with real issues if we're saying that words can hurt in that way. And so that's the key to all of this, is understanding that what these people need who are reacting to each other is they need a healthy relationship to their own sense of failure, their own sense of competition. They need to look within themselves and go, hey, what things hurt my feelings when people say them? And they need to go, I need to not want to have this hurt my feelings. I need to not want to feel like a failure, because I guarantee you feel like something has gone wrong if somebody says something to you and it hurts your feelings. And whether that's something where you translate the failure that they see into a personal perception of failure in yourself, or it's that you go, how could anybody think that about me, right? It doesn't really matter either way, because both of those are things to address. If you have a concept of your own failure, go, great, why do I see this as a failure? Can I find a way to not see this as a failure? Can I find a way to see myself as succeeding at being me? And that's all that really matters, is that I'm being myself with the understanding that I am myself in every situation that I walk into. No matter how much failure seems to surround me, I maintain my sense of self by going, well, I'm doing my best. I'm not a failure. And if I'm not the thing that I want to be in every way that I want to be that thing, that doesn't make me a failure either. That just means that's a circumstance that I'm looking at and experiencing a relationship to. And maybe it's not failure to me to not be the thing that I want to be. Maybe I can succeed at being the thing that I am. And then on the other side of it, if you go, well, other people see me as a failure, and it's like, how could they see me that way? Then you can go, well, okay, so in this way, if I want to look at it this way, then the thing I'm really failing at is I'm failing at not giving a shit what they think. I'm failing at not caring what they think. And then how do you feel now? That's the kind of failure you actually are, is you're failing to not care what they think. And that's it. That's the only failure that you're being in that sense. Because they're saying, they're looking at you and they're looking down on you, right? And you're going, it hurts my feelings. How could they see me this way? I'm a good person. I do the right things. I'm nice to people. I care about people. I'm not selfish. How could they still look at me and see somebody they hate? You know, you see this in politics a lot, right? And if you're coming to that place, then the thing, of course, again, to do, as I just said, is you just go, well, the thing I'm failing at is in how I receive other people's opinions about me, how I receive their perspectives about me. Because I know fundamentally it's just an opinion, it's just a point of view, it's just a perspective. And now this is where things can get complicated, though, is if their perspective has something in it where you're not sure whether they are right or they're wrong. And maybe they see something bad in you and you go, oh, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but I don't know. But if you're thinking about things in that way and you're trying to figure that out, that means you're an empathetic person. That means you do care, and so that's a success because you're trying to see things the right way. And if you're coming from that constructive place of trying to do things the right way, and you're still running into problems with this person, and they are doing things that you wouldn't do, because you would see them as being combative or difficult or shutting people out or shutting people down, and not in a friendly, competitive way like I was talking, but really trying to do that in an absolute sort of way. If you see somebody coming from a place like that, then you can go, this person is very difficult to interact with, and they're making things very difficult. And it's impossible to have the right response to this situation, because they've made it impossible, because it's not on you to know how to respond to every situation. However, you can use it as a tool to grow in understanding and in relationship with somebody, but sometimes those people need to be told that they're awful. They just need to be told to go fuck themselves, and they're gonna hate that. They're not gonna wanna hear that. And, you know, maybe you shouldn't say it to them because they might be violent too, right? They might lash out. They might punish you in some way if they have control over your life. And that's why you have to have control over your own life. You have to be able to support yourself, if possible. But if you can't, you can support yourself internally. You can judge a situation rationally, and you can go, how can I keep things safe for myself? How can I maintain a situation where I'm on my way to creating new circumstances that will put me in a new space? And so that brings us back to the beginning where I was talking about a failed business. It's the same thing in this case, where it's not that you've failed if another person doesn't like you, especially a person you're close with. Maybe you live with this person, right? And they're kind of making your life hell because you're walking on eggshells. You're trying to find your way around them. You're trying to avoid the abusive dynamics. And they are capitalizing on your own sense of you trying to do the right thing, but them having put you in such a complicated situation that you're always on the back foot. They capitalize on that to say, hey, you are the one to create the idea essentially that you are the one who is causing problems in that situation. They've put you in an impossible situation to begin with. And it's totally exemplary of the quality of creating all sorts of boundaries. And this is why boundaries are bad. Everybody needs boundaries in society, but you don't need boundaries between friends, because friends' jobs are to break down the boundaries, to help people reveal their true selves. It's like cracking the shell of a seed to help it to blossom, to sprout, right? The shell needs to crack for the seed to sprout. And part of the cracking of that shell is the understanding that friendships are not about establishing boundaries. They're about breaking through the need for boundaries. And if somebody really has some kind of like totally screwed up way of doing things, it's not that you're needing to create boundaries with them. It's that that person needs to stop being screwed up. They need to stop being motivated by others' suffering. In the sense of like doing things to upset people makes them feel good, or doing things to control people gives them a sense of power. Doing things to hurt people gives them a rush. You know, people like that are obviously insane. But people who just don't like the ideas that other people share, or they need people to agree with everything that they think and every perspective that they have, those people are best benefited by somebody who's able to dig into their insecurities and their lack of self-worth and their lack of self-esteem in a loving way, by going, hey, look, none of this stuff really needs to matter to you. And that's a good friend. Like, it's a good friend who will do that, who understands that it'll make someone angry, and they go, look, hey, I'm your friend, so we're gonna simulate all of this through my friendship with you, because what you understand is that if something that somebody says makes you upset, what really makes you upset is the idea that they're saying it to hurt you. That's the thing that you should be responding to, because that's the only thing of any real material value, is whether they're doing it with the intention of hurting you. Even if they know that something might hurt your feelings and they go, I'm gonna say this anyway because I know it might hurt your feelings, but I'm gonna say it to be real with you, because you getting your feelings hurt is the path to you healing those feelings. That's very, very different than somebody going, I know you have a sensitivity, and out of some kind of malice, I'm gonna dig into that sensitivity. Because of jealousy, perhaps. I feel jealous or something like that, and I'm just resentful, and so I'm gonna dig into it in that sense of resentment. And this is why good, close friendships where you can really compete with each other and where all kinds of competition are meant to be healthy is really important, because it teaches you how you deal with failure. It teaches you where your own sense of self-worth is. It teaches you the difference between simulating these things and somebody doing them seriously. And it lets you come into a relationship with yourself where you go, I'm always competing with myself. I'm the only person I'm competing with. And then all systems of competition outside of myself are reflections of the competition I have going on inside myself. And so the last thing I say about that is that what is very hard to gauge, however, sometimes with people, is if somebody is competing with you because of some insecurity that they have, or some woundedness that they have, and some need to glorify themselves or prop themselves up or feel special or feel smart or feel efficacious or whatever it is. And they're not just in the simulation of these things. They're not just having fun with them. Like, a lot of comedians have fun with these concepts, and so they have roast battles. They sit, and the whole point is to dig into somebody's insecurities. It's the whole point of those competitions, and everybody knows it's for fun. It's all about a joke. It's all about laughing. At no point does anybody end up crying. At least they're not supposed to, because that's the whole point. If you really got your feelings hurt so bad, then that would be a great place for you to look at it and go, geez, this was all just for fun. And you might go, oh, it hurts me people can see me this way, that they can see these things about me this way. Even see it at all, even if they don't think it or feel it. But you know fundamentally that you're just in the commerce of ideas, you're just in the marketplace of thoughts, and you're running into the thoughts dissociated from people. And that's the whole point of all of this, is to be able to dissociate thoughts from people, because when you do that, the next thing that happens is you go, well, people's perceptions are just their perceptions. Even if they perceive something that I don't find flattering or good or whatever, it's just their perception. The only question that matters is, why are they doing the things that they're doing? What is their intent? If they say something that upsets you, are they trying to heal themselves on some level? in the expression of that thing. That's okay to do. If they say something to upset you, are they trying to hurt you? Because that's not okay. However, if they are doing that, they are still a good example to you for how not to be hurt by that. To remember to go within and go, what's hurting me about this person's intent to hurt me? Why would I get hurt by the feelings of a bully? Why would I care what a bully thinks? It's the most nonsensical thing in the world. But if you're looking at relationships, it gets really difficult because a bully in a relationship, just like I just described, is often a gaslighter and a manipulator. And what they are going to do is to cause you to tie your own sense of worth into that relationship and into their esteem for you and into how they perceive you perceiving them according to them. So they can make you feel like a bad person for seeing them as an asshole, which is what you need to see them as. You need to name the beast. You need to name the monster. And the monster does not want to hear its own fucking name. That's how it works. That's how gaslighting and manipulation works. And that's the problem with therapeutic circles, because they tend to the manipulators just as much as they tend to anybody else. And the manipulators can manipulate that whole system. That's what's wrong with it.